Ayan na. Kamusta kayo dyan, mga kameta? Pasensya na, medyo late tayo nag-start again. I'm sure you had all sorts of very fantastic discussions dun sa mga kabilang channels. Once again, pasalamat tayo sa lahat ng mga nanonood sa atin. I know nagkaroon ng internet connection problems, unfortunately, kahapon dun sa live stream natin, dun sa kauna-una natin in person na vlogs with si birthday boy Kristan. I was a bit conscious na birthday niya at kailangan siguro humabol dun sa mga um, personal and private commitments, obviously to celebrate his special day. So once again, super birthday, happy birthday dun sa isa sa mga pinakamabait at magulang na na vloggers diyan sa bansa. And of course, thank you so much both kay Mark and Chris for gracing us yesterday to have this fantastic discussion. Obviously, of course, you were able to catch also the talagang sinulit namin yung pag renta, pag reserve namin doon. We also had attorney Star Lamparo, of course, to also discuss divorce law, potential co-warranto, and yung existing preventive suspension order against Alice Go, not to mention cyber libel, not to mention, all sorts of different issues, including ICC and what could be the modalities under which Duterte could be arrested by the ICC in the coming months if totoo at tama itong mga predictions or mga prognostications ng mga iba't ibang tao, including yung mga, of course, in-interview natin like Senator Trillanes, and to a certain degree, of course, yung paborito nyo, yung crush ng bayan, si Ronald Alden Llamas, yan. Mga yan. So, for some reason, I don't know kahapon, we didn't get touch a lot on this issue, but I think kailangan natin balikan ito because I'm 100% sure now we saw in other mga kabilang channels and mga in mainstream discussion lumalabas na ulit itong issue na ito. At ito yung mga corruption scandals nung panahon ni Digong. No? Pag-usapan natin yan because obviously Pharmally is back in the media, in the headlines with a vengeance. So for some reason, we didn't manage because there was a lot that I wanted to talk about with sila Chris and with kaibigan natin si Mark, among our other guests dito sa Pharmally na yan. But again, I was concerned, I was a bit conscious about yung time niya. Again, of course, again, see, even if alam ko yung iba medyo hater mode lang sila, I get it. Pasensya na if medyo I overtalk kahapon. Hindi ko naman dinideny na madaldal tayo, but sometimes what happens is that if I'm sleepy and tired or I'm stressed, and we had a lot of technical issues kahapon kasi ako nag-set up lahat, set up ng lighting, set up ng cameras. There were like 4 different cameras there. And then nakita ko dito na may issue ng konti dito sa ano natin. Unfortunately dito sa internet natin, dami nagreklamo. So medyo na ako sa na flustered ako. So my tendency sometimes is to over talk. Not only and the more over talk actually pagdating sa pag may mga technical issues. So I take your honest I take your honest I take constructive criticisms, and pasensya na minsan kung nagkakulang din tayo. But anyway, I think we got a lot out of our discussions kahapon. And bukas, of course, hopefully, abangan nyo dyan sa YouTube. Ipopost natin itong interviews natin with sila Kristan in the afternoon. Habol ko rin ito sa Facebook. Obviously, mukhang sa YouTube, mas interesado tao sa mga political issues nowadays. I don't know what happens sa Facebook. Is it the algorithm? Ang dami nagreklamo na hindi sila na-notify. So please, put notifications on or subscriptions on or whatever dito sa Facebook para rin updated kayo pag when we go live or when we post interesting stuff. So maraming salamat again for your constructive criticisms. Yung mga iba naman na haters, etc. Bahala na kayo sa buhay nyo. Problema niyo yan. But dun sa constructive criticism nyo, point taken. And again, apologies. But I think we still had a very, very interesting discussion. Nevertheless. Pag-usapan natin ito guys, itong issue ng Pharmally among others. Because sa aking palagay, on one hand, isa sa mga pinaka-turn off kay Digong and his legacies, of course, yung West Philippine Sea issue. And what many see as his subservience. And as a Singaporean friend put it, I'm not gonna say who, said yung slavish attitude ni Duterte vis-a-vis China. Now, by the way, I was supposed to actually, We were supposed to have our meta earlier today with a professor friend of mine from Singapore, but due to some family emergency issue, we had to postpone it. But hopefully we'll have it later this month again. So I'm trying to get points of view from experts all around the world. So we had friends from the U.S., multiple friends from the United States, from New York, from Rhode Island, of course from California with us. Dito sa deep dive reboot natin ng discussion natin. We're hoping to get also people from medyo down under soon, God willing. So don't worry, there are a lot we're doing. By the way, na-posting natin kanina, yung Bulwagan ng mga Bayani edition ng interviews natin with the legendary Ronald Llamas. Please watch, guys. Supportan yan. In-effort ko yan, ha. Naghanap kami ng tamang venue. Shoutout dyan sa UP Asian Center for allowing us to use. Very interesting discussion na relevant of course sa ating bayan, sa ating kasaysayan, sa ating mga bayani. O inedit ko pa yan, in-effort pa yan. So please pakita ng konting konting pagmamahal. Alright? So check nyo yan. Ito yung latest video natin dyan sa YouTube. Pakicheck yan. I'll try to also share it dyan sa Facebook in the coming days. So thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it. Itong continuous support na binibigay niyo sa amin throughout the years and throughout the months, no? Hindi pa decades, but God willing, dyan tayo pupunta. Anyway, balikan natin, guys. Let's talk about these things because sa akin palagay, isa sa mga pinakamalaking problema ni Digong ngayon is yung kanyang legacy pagdating sa West Philippine Sea. And in particular, of course, pinag-usapan natin dito, guys, yung kanyang gentleman's agreement and other forms of potentially, some would say, treasonous or at the very least ruinous or deleterious, diba? So if not treasonous, if not ruinous, at the very least deleterious, no, na agreements with China, which may have undermined our national security. Now, not to mention natin, pinag-usapan natin yan with Justice Carpio, pinag-usapan natin yan with Admiral Ong, with Attorney Batumbakal, among other experts. So I don't think to overdo this over and over again. But anyway, I appreciate, guys, itong interventions that we're also seeing right now on another front. So without a question, guys, we see a big move in the Philippine Congress and potentially also soon dito sa Philippine House of Representatives. Actually, it's happening as we speak, to actually also look dun sa governance, particularly potential corruption scandals under the Duterte administration. Now, obviously, everyone is familiar dito, guys. Stop yung mga commentary na technical. Don't distract me. I'm trying to focus, guys. Okay. Yan ang mahirap dito kung one-man team ka eh. Okay. Balikan natin. Guys, pag-usapan natin yan because yung West Philippine Sea legacy, alam natin na this is a huge problem. Alright? It's a huge problem. And there are investigations as we speak. But the other thing that I think is important and potentially mas tinging pa ito, potentially, because it's not the first time that the Dutertes have been accused of, doing a little bit mumbo-jumbo stuff when it comes to fiscal resources. If you're not, unless you were in a different universe, don't forget na not long ago, ang pinakamalaking issue sa ating bansa is yung confidential funds issue. Right, I'm not saying it's necessarily a case of graft or corruption, but nevertheless, it's something that doesn't taste nice, doesn't look nice, doesn't sound legit, right? But if you look at it, while the confidential fund issue somehow put the office of the vice president on the defensive, and to a certain degree, of course, also marginalized Sara Duterte when it comes to mainstream discussion, ang issue dito, guys, is that pagdating sa surveys, hindi significantly bumaba yung numbers ni Sara Duterte. In fact, only recently nakikita natin na medyo bumaba yung numbers ni Sara Duterte to around 60%-ish territory. And that's significant. And this is an Okta, by the way, survey. So, we see this decline. But this decline did not happen after yung confidential fund issue. I think the last time there was a significant drop in the numbers of both Sara Duterte and BBM, mas may kinalaman ito sa issue ng inflation and living standards and cost of living, so mga economic problems. But, as I said, although yung issue ng confidential fund, yung spending, 125 million pesos in 11 days, allegedly, even though the confidential fund issue may not have hurt Sara Duterte in terms of her popularity or undermined yung kanyang base, or at least soft base, let's put it that way. Kasi yung base will stand by you no matter what, mga loyalists yan. But yung soft base, I think if a number of things come together, it could be really tricky for the Dutertes, right? Because yung confidential fund, pwede natin debatein yan eh. Obviously, anyone who knows what's going on will have serious issues. But at the surface level, kung medyo partisan ka, medyo hindi ka bumibigyan ng attention sa mga bagay-bagay, at pero sabihin, bakit? May confidential fund din naman si Aquino. Bakit? I mean, you can play that game eh. Bakit? Ganon, di ba? So I think the confidential fund issue was not articulated in a way that came off as a brazen misuse of government funds. Two, not to us, kasi tayo, medyo alam natin nangyari sa mundo, pero doon sa mga soft base ni Sara, di ba? So siguro sabihin natin mga 45% out of 60 to 70% niya. Hindi masyadong it didn't take as much root, no? Hindi siya nag-resonate masyado. And my sense is that's partly because when it comes to Duterte, one of his points of popularity is supposedly yung kanyang anti-corruption stance. It's supposedly yung kanyang, okay, sige, sabihin natin marahas siya, sige, sabihin natin brutal siya, sige, kahit tanggapin natin na baka totoo talagang EJK. Ang sasabihin ng mga supporters na pero hindi siya corrupt. Pero galit siya sa corruption. Pero he get things done. And I think that's why the investigations now are important, because they question that very premise. They go deep down into the whole branding of Duterte as supposedly a guy who get things done, a guy who's not corrupt. And as Duterte put it very nicely, right? Not even a whiff of corruption, right? So this is very important. And so balikan natin yung kasaysayan, no? So if you look at it, when Duterte ran for the presidency, he had one thing in common with Pinoy when Pinoy also ran for the presidency. And that was the argument na galit siya sa corruption. Na pag siya naging presidente, he's gonna get rid of all the crooks, the corrupt people, the oligarchs, turgista, kriminal. So it's gonna be a kind of a cleansing exercise, and democratically elected cleansing exercise. Yun yung branding ni Duterte sa sarili niya. And in many ways, it worked, because if you look at Davao, for instance, if you look at the World Bank studies and different kind of studies, it would say that Davao has one of the most efficient business processing bureaucracy. So napakababa yung red tape daw sa Davao. So yung ease of doing business ng Davao is very, very good, no? So, and the Duterte administration can point out, tingnan niyo man, Duterte people point out, tingnan niyo man Davao, malinis, maayos, walang krimen, ganun. So, and most importantly, yung branding ni Duterte sa sarili niya na humble tao siya, na nakagano siya. May hater tayo na isang araw nagsabi na, anong sinasabi na si Duterte, gano'n, nauto ka naman sa... I was talking about his campaign financing. Alright? Yan ang problema sa mga ibang tao dyan. Hindi nakikinig, hindi nag-gets, tapos nagmamatalino, nagmamagaling. Tapos pag pinoint out mo sila, ayan, hurt na naman yung feelings nila. I was talking about the campaign financing of Duterte. I never bought yung propaganda niya, but simpleng tao siya. Yung pagiging simpleng tao niya, narinig na natin kay Alice Goyan, yung mga simpleng tao. Tapos, yung isa, naka BMW bike. Yung isa kabila naman, may Rolls-Royce McLaren. No? Or walang McLaren, pero may chopper. Diba? No, let's go back to this, because now, the premise of that very argument is under question, right? Now, in fairness to Duterte, magaling talaga siya mag-perform, right? Kaya nga performative talaga yung kanyang approach to politics, and it worked a lot. And I'll tell you why it works. So if you look at it, ang magaling kay Digong is magaling yung ano niya eh. He would do some symbolic act here and there to project some sort of contrived political reality, or to reinforce a certain branding, diba? Hallmark sa kanya. So if you remember, guys, one of the things that Duterte did early on in his office is he fired his former spokesman as the NIA chief. As soon as he put it, there was a whiff of corruption. That was a very interesting period, because some people will actually say, well, they were not necessarily a fan of, siguro maalala niya itong taong to, si Peter Lavinia. Siya po yung spokesman talaga ni Digong, through and through. And then later on, of course, he took over the National Irrigation Administration, or NIA. But later on, nung nagkaroon ng konting mga corruption issue, and according to Duterte, sabi niya, he fired Lavinia for allegedly receiving may 40% cut daw siya sa projects or whatever, right? So, ito yung sinabi ni Duterte nung February 24, this is 2017. Very early on sa kanyang administration. So this is what Duterte said dun sa isang speech niya, na he just fired an appointee who is from Davao City, any spokesman. Sabi niya, when I said there will be no corruption, there will be no corruption. As a matter of fact, I fired last night one taga Davao for simply making a remark. Sabi ko nga, he's out. And I told him, even a whiff of corruption, talagang tanggalin kita. Alright? Talagang tanggalin kita. Tapos, so, so actually, nagkaroon ng meeting between NI directors with Duterte sa Panakan noong February 23, 2017, kung saan they said that Lavinia's supposed sabi ni Lavinia, sir, wala naman akong ginawa, ganyan. So, there were some sort of discussion behind the scenes na wag naman natin i-fire ka agad. Ito, sir, pag-usapan natin, baka naman walang nangyari. Let's not jump to conclusions. But, pero according dun sa ibang reports, yung dati niyang spokesman would say, kayo ang bahala sa akin when there were discussions of projects, different projects dun sa regional office. Let me show you guys the exact quote here. Kasi I want you guys, this is important kasi we have to go back to the very the origins, no, ng itong image of Duterte as, you know, the cleanser, right? As the, you know, the dirty Harry who's not corrupt, who's incorruptible, but of course he uses mga violent means to protect the law-abiding citizen. Yung mga ganyan-ganyan charat-charat na yan. So, ito yung mga quotes from Digong yung time na finar niya yung kanyang spokesman. Right? And here you can see, guys, talaga, magaling talaga mag-performance itong tao na ito. Diba? Na, ito na nga, spokesman ko nga. Ito na nga, taga Davao na nga, finar ko nga ito. So, this episode for me was very important. I'll explain to you guys very shortly. Let's just finish this. So, biglang si Duterte, ayan, letter P, letter I, alam niyo na, hindi natin sabihin, mga matino tayo, disente tayo, sabi niya, may tanggalin talaga ako. Tapos, mura-mura niya, nung allegedly, ito si Lavinia involved dun sa mga kickbacks daw. May ibang version yung dating cabinet secretary si Evasco Jr., who would also later on be eased out. Sabi na, hindi naman nasak, pero nagpa-resign na lang or something like that. But anyway, si Lavinia himself actually denied this. This said, I've been vilified in the past, my name used, abused, and maligned. Recently, there had been efforts to discredit me again. There are rumors circulating that I've asked money from NIA contractors. These are not true. To spare the president from these embarrassing stories, particularly in these times of intensive attacks on him, I have quietly left the government. I have neither personal vested interest in it nor ill intent towards NIA and the whole government which we're trying to reform. So in short, nagsakripisyo na lang daw siya, lumabas na lang siya para wala nang hanash, para hindi maapektuhan yung reputation ng napakagaling na presidente ni Duterte. So, for me, this period was very important because if you remember, guys, this is where Digong was able to do something that Aquino was not able to do. Because President Aquino, God bless his soul, I think anyone with a decent heart and a functioning gray matter knows that pagdating sa Aquinos, walang bahit na duda when it comes to issues of corruption or government. They were clean on that. I mean, show me any, if there were really something, they were pinned down already during Duterte time. Wala. But one major criticism against Pinoy was that he didn't do much about potential corruption or alleged corruption dun sa mga ranks niya, ng mga kabineta niya or mga people na malapit sa kanya. Of course, you had the DAP scandal, Disbursement Acceleration Program scandal, right? During Pinoy. Again, please refer to the interview I had with Suzara, who worked in the DBM before. It's there as a podcast natin for the context, so I don't want to, but there were also other issues. For instance, sa DOTR, Department of Transportation, yung mga palpak dyan sa nangyari sa MRT, yung mga laglag bala scandals na nangyari ng panahon ni Pinoy, lahat ng mga yan. Not to mention, of course, also issues sa Department of Agriculture. So there were all sorts of things being hurled against Abaya, Alcala, all of these people around Pinoy. Not to mention, of course, also the Mama Sapano, because the criticism against Pinoy was that he placed in charge General Purisima, who was already under investigation, to run a very sensitive military operation, counter-terror operation, which was the Mama Sapanaman. So in short, what happened there was Pinoy ran on a very strict anti-corruption initiative, and yet during his time, not a single high-level official was fired or put under investigation, even when there was more than a whiff of potential anomalies, etc. Now, again, as I said, dun sa DAP, I defer to people, good people like Cesar Amores, who explain the technicalities of this, because the DAP one, it was ruled as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, but it was not ruled necessarily as a corruption case. It was kind of a usurpation of the power of the purse of the Congress. So medyo constitutional yung argument. But nevertheless, ang dami kasi nangyari ng panahon ni Pinoy na parang, I'm not sure about it. Yung mga laglag bala issue. Some people were placed in charge of Mama Sabana. So please, for instance, listen to my interview with Mayor Magalong, right, who back then as a number 2 at the Philippine National Police investigated the circumstances of what went wrong during the Mama Sapano and the Purissima Angle, among others. So I want you guys to look at those things. We can have a debate about whether actually talagang nangyaring corruption or anything like that. But I think the problem with the with the Aquino administration was, even when there were high suspicions of misconduct or abuse of power, or at least may bahit na duda or shadow of doubt about whether good governance was there, Pinoy didn't fire anyone. Didn't fire anyone na malapit sa kanya. So I think this is where the populist genius of Duterte came in. Magaling siya sa pagka-performative na. And by firing yung kanyang spokesman, campaign spokesman, someone in Davao, he sent the signal na he's really not a corrupt person and there's no one above the law, and wala siyang kinikilingan, wala siyang pinoprotektahan. So again, we can have a debate about whether really Lavinia was involved in that, because again, there was no due process. Was there due process? Alam mo naman kay Digong, he was never a fan of due process. Ironically, for a lawyer, ex-prosecutor, he was never a fan of that. He would just... But from a political messaging, from an image branding point of view, him firing very early on, half a year into office, his former spokesman, a close friend of him, just because may bahit na duda na baka involved siya sa corruption, that I think was very powerful in driving home itong brand niya as Duterte the Punisher. Duterte na hindi corrupt, galit sa criminal, galit sa corruption. So, this is where, we can have a long conversation about Yolanda too. Again, as I said, I think there were some, there's a debate we can have about who's really most at fault. But then again, Yolanda, SAF, DAP, breakdowns in MRT, laglag bala, all of this, but no one at the highest level was fired. Even sa NAIA, if I'm not mistaken, even after all the laglag bala crisis, walang na-fire. So, that really helped Digong. When Digong comes in and immediately fires his ex-spokesman, right? And sends the signal, see, ako, iba ako. So, this is where in politics, optics matter. Performativity matters. And Digong was really, really good in that. Sobrang galing siya in terms of that. And that's why I think, even if a lot of people say, medyo hindi ako agree sa drug war niya, medyo hindi ako natutuwa dun sa China policies na, they would say, pero tignan mo naman si Digong, hindi nga corrupt tignan mo, pati nga yung spokesman niya, finar niya kaagad. So this is, I think, where the genius of Duterte's populism comes in, when it comes to creating this image na hindi talaga siya corrupt, etc. But we knew, guys, that things were actually, obviously, more interesting than that, if I can put it that way, diba? So bago tayo pumunta sa issue ng Pharmally, let me remind everyone na before the whole pandemic, before the whole Pharmally scandal, before the whole concerns about Duque, etc., actually, the Philippines had its worst ranking when it comes to corruption in almost a decade, nung 2019. So by 2019 pa lang, there were enough concerns about corruption in the Philippines that the Duterte rank was lowest rank for the Philippines in 7 years, right? So this bleeds way into the Aquino administration. So objectively speaking, or at least based on whatever objective evaluation or index we can have of corruption in the country, actually lumala yung corruption sa panahon ni Digong kumpara kay Pinoy. Kung tinignan mo dito, guys, yung mga, for instance, yung international corruption rankings natin, right? or in perceptions of corruption, etc. So this is where, guys, we can talk about West Philippine Sea. We can talk about this gentleman's agreement. We can talk about a lot of mga mumbo jumbo happen. One thing that has not been talked about enough is the fact that yung Philippines corruption rankings actually worsened even before pandemic and before Pharmally and all of this issue came out. And then of course the Pharmally thing happened, right? And then of course this Pharmally thing happened. And we all know that the Pharmally thing is potentially just the tip of the iceberg, right? Right? It's potentially just the tip of the iceberg because there were so many things na nangyari nung panahon ng pandemic in terms of acquisitions of PPEs, all sorts of different gadgets. Naalala yung mga nakakainis na mask na ginagamit natin noon na alam natin scientifically. Hindi mask, yung face mask. Naalala niyo yan? Na sabi nga nung iba, baka mas malala pa yan dahil i-attract pa niya yung germs and all of that. So, there were all sorts of mumbo-jumbo stuff. And also concerns about super expensive, guys. Super expensive vaccines, including from China. Napakamahal yung mga vaccines na ako natin China. Sabi na ng mga makapili na. Yeah, face shield. Sorry, face shield. Yeah. Naalala yung face shield na yan. Nasa Pilipinas lang nakikita mo na mandatory. Naalala ko, nag-face shield pa ako nung nag-international travel ako noong 2021. Imagine, guys, naka-mask ka, naka-face shield ka sa loob ng aeroplano. Right? I mean, that was insane. And imagine if you're flying for 10, 12 hours. Right? And just to get to know na itong face shield na yan, walang kwenta when it comes to, if anything, baka it's the opposite. It attracts the germs and everything like that, right? And gives you a false sense of security. And yet, makaning ginastos sa mga yan. And kasi mandatory siya, di ba? So everyone was supposed to buy it. So sinong kumita dyan, di ba? So we can have a very serious discussion about, all sorts of different things that went really, really wrong and were really, really crazy nung panahon ng pandemic. Let's not forget, the Philippines performed among the worst on earth when it came to pandemic. Whether it's the number of casualties, number of people who contracted it, assuming alam pa natin what was really happening. And also, of course, yung economic recession. Our economy almost contracted by 10% nung first year of pandemic, right? We had 5 quarters of recession. That's the worst ever. No one in Southeast Asia, in fact, no one in Asia suffered as much. The only country na malapit sa atin is India, who was under Narendra Modi, who was very much like Digong in many ways, right? So, that's what I'm saying. But now, the Pharmally issue really is coming back. Of course, the Pharmally issue really became big just before the 2020 elections, but Digong was in power, and Digong was trolling openly sila, Dick Gordon, among others, diba? And anyone who wanted to go after him. And Digong was still very popular during pandemic period. Of course, ang dami pang mga binibigay na ayuda, ganun-ganun. His popularity actually shot up to, to more than 90% at some point. But this is the guy. This is the issue, guys. Here's the rub, right? If you look at actual studies, tsaka yung mga commission audit, etc., ang dami mga concerns with yung mga anomalya, tsaka mga scandals and potential corruption scandals nung time ni Digong, no? So in 2021, the Commission on Audit called out the Department of Health for deficiency in its handling of 67.3 billion pesos in COVID-19 funds. But Duterte was quick to clear the DOH, and then Health Secretary Duque III. Sabi niya, it's impossible to steal 67.3 billion pesos, stressing that the deficiency only meant that some documents required by COA were missing. So dito pa lang, sabi ni Digong, I'm sorry but I said, even if I'm the only one left, I will stand for Duque even if it will bring me down. Alright? So according to data from Pulse Asia, actually approval rating Digong was doing pretty okay during the pandemic period. It shot up later on. But this is the thing, guys. Left and right, there were concerns about how much. So ito, based on COA's audit report, part of the 67.3 billion pesos handled by DOH for its response to health crisis was more than 40 billion pesos transferred to the procurement service of Department of Budget and Management. The fund transfer of DOH to the PSD DBM was flagged as it was made without the required memorandum of agreement and certificates of previous liquidation. In short, may mga shortcut dyan in terms of paperwork and all, and you wonder why. Some, or 11.5 billion pesos of the over 40 billion pesos was paid to Pharmally Pharmaceutical Corporation for medical PPE or personal protective equipment such as face mask and face shield. All right? So this is very important, guys. This is where things got like really, really tricky. So ang daming mga ginastos na hindi natin alam ano yung paper trail. Saan talaga ginastos, kung ma-confirm ba natin yan. And then here comes yung mga kontrata-kontrata na ginawa nila with private sector and quite dodgy one based on at least some of the reports that we're seeing here. Ito yung corporation na yan was allegedly financed by Duterte's friend and former advisor, si Michael Yang, who was and this was only 4 months before bagged overwhelming contracts from the government. So if this is not suspicious, guys, I don't know what on earth is suspicious. And obviously, well before there was someone called Alice Go, right, whose origins is very questionable. There was Michael Yang, and no one knew who this guy was. Paano naging malakaning advisor? Pilipino ba ito? At ano ba talagang business niya, di ba? And of course, you can look at all this. So ito, guys. So this is where things got really tricky. So by 2019 pa lang, there were a lot of issues, concerns about corruption in our country. But things got even trickier, guys, when the pandemic happened. And then when COA, from inside the government, was flagging anomalies, Duterte himself will come in and shut down the debate and say, I stand by this guy. So, seryosong problema talaga yan, guys. From March 2020 to July 2021, the then barely 1-year-old company, itong Pharmally, with less than 600,000 pesos capitalization, bagged 13 COVID-19 contracts. The capital was not even 1% of the value of deals it had with the government. Baka mas mayaman pa tayo dito sa kumpanya na yun, di ba? 600,000 pesos lang yung capitalization niya. It was able to bag contracts worth, what, billions of pesos? However, both the company and Yang were defended by Duterte, who stressed that it's quote-unquote business, referring to the COVID-19 deals bagged by Pharmally. He said, what is clear is that there was a contract, there was delivery, the specification were complete. In short, wag titignan yan. Okay na yan, tama na yan, pwede na yan, ganoon. Based on the data from COA, the biggest contract that Pharmally, Pharmaceutical Corporation, had with the government was 3.8 billion pesos in May 2022 for millions of PPE sets worth 1,900 pesos each. Now, some of you may be medical experts. You tell me if that's a decent price. Now, ibang question pa kung decent pa yung quality ng mga PPE na binibigay nila, kung legit pa talaga yan. Tapos, yung isang month, Ombudsman recommended the filing of charges against Duque and Lloyd Christopher Lau, who was then the head of the PSDBM, over the illegal transfer of 40 billion pesos from March to December 2020 from DOH to PSDBM. So, pati Ombudsman pumasok rin dito, hindi lang COA. Sa kanila, it was a violation of the Anti-Graft and Corruption Practices Act, and that Duque and Lau quote, acted with evident bad faith or gross inexcusable negligence. So, ito po yung argument mismo ng Ombudsman. Right? I mean, this is crazy, guys, right? Now, Ombudsman also said that Duque and Lau were guilty of grave misconduct and conduct prejudicial to the best interest of the service, for which they were merit the penalty of perpetual disqualification from employment in government, na forfeit din yung kanilang retirement. But, if totoo na talagang marami, like they care for retirement. Okay. Now, on June 3, 2020, Duque told the committee at the House of Representatives it was Duterte who ordered the transfer of over 40 billion pesos in COVID-19 funds. So now suddenly things make sense. Why would Duterte defend them? Well, maybe Duterte had a hand in these things. All right? Ito yung direct quote. Please check it out. I mean, guys, this is crazy. And it's crazy that we have to wait until 2024 for us na balikan itong issue na brazen ito nangyari. Okay? So check it out, guys. Why would Duterte defend this case and try to shut down the debate? Because he himself made the decision na over 40 billion in COVID-19 funds would be transferred under quote-unquote suspicious circumstances. Duque naman said, kailangan yan, legal yan, kasi yun nga, severity of public health crisis. So they used yung crisis mode, emergency mode, to try to justify itong mga mumbo-jumbo, quick deals na yan under very, very suspicious circumstances. And more important, with very, very suspicious people. Michael Yang. Ito, isang company naman na ginawa lang ng isang araw na ang total capitalization niya, wala pang 1 million pesos. To what? To be involved in billions of pesos of deals? My goodness. You tell me this is not suspicious at all. So, I think this is where the issue of corruption could sting, right? And could affect the powerful family. If balikan talaga yung issue na to, and that's exactly what's happening right now, right? With more and more legislators and more people involved in legislative branch saying that talaga dapat balikan itong Pharmally issue na yun kasi ito yung biggest scam talaga nangyari. Well, arguably, ever in Philippine history, right? I mean, all sorts of crazy stuff have been happening, right, in the Philippines, but this is next level. So, si Senator Gordon has been, well, former Senator Gordon has been back in the headlines in recent days. I think, an interview din siya sa kabilang channels, among others, and he called talaga ito ay biggest scam. Sabi niya, what happened at Pharmally is the biggest scam and the president of this country masterminded it. I can say that without batting an eye. All right? Wait, when is this again? Yeah, this is now. He should have said ex-president, right, of this country, because obviously he's not referring to BBM, right? So what happened in the front is the biggest scam, and the president of this country or ex-president of this country masterminded it. I can say that without batting an eye. I think sinabi ni Gordon. Okay? And remember, Gordon and Lacson were the two guys who were really overseeing this investigation for quite some time. Pero yun nga shinut down sila effectively Tapos inaway-away pa sila directly ni Gong, binastos pa sila, parang, di ba, parang personal attack pa yung ginawa niya. Sa laki ng chan mo, Gordon, mga ganun pa siya ni, di ba, Digong yung time na yan. Talagang binuli-buli lang siya ni Digong. Di ba, nung time na yan. Right? So, ito yung direct quotes from Gordon. You can see it yourself. So obviously, si Gordon, siya yung chairman ng Senate Blue Ribbon Committee nung time na yan. And they had at least 18 hearings and submitted the committee report to the Ombudsman. In fact, we filed the case. Gordon detailed the misappropriation of funds, stating that Duterte transferred 47 billion pesos, and quote, when the COA investigated, Duterte cursed at them. He was angry because Christopher Lau was exposed. Duterte's administration never answered for it. Now they are scared. Former Senator Drilon said Duque is afraid. It is now pointing to Duterte. Ayan na, maglalaglagan na sila. So he added that he told Duque to resign if he didn't want to follow orders. If he followed, he's liable. His only chance is to be state witness against Duterte. So ito na ang usapan na ngayon. Kung anong mangyari ngayon kay Duque. If Duque wants to save his own, he will have to stand witness. And if this order really came all the way from former President Duterte, then he has to stand by that under oath, right? So we're entering some very interesting situation whereby the very branding of Duterte as anti-corruption and all of that is now under question, and there could be some serious political and legal implications. Just when Digong is also being investigated for all other things, including gentleman's agreement, and of course, ultimately the ICC issue. So all of these things are coming together, guys. Are coming together. So yung mga yung mga fanatiko dyan na hindi nag-iisip, or nagbubulag-bulagan, or pinipilit nila mga bahala kayo sa buhay nyo, bahala ng Diyos sa inyo, at soon, bahala na rin ang hustisya sa mga idol nyo, mga kulto nyo, alright? So, lots of interesting things are happening here, guys. So, on that note, I'll keep it here because hintayin natin ano pa yung mga susunod na mga pangyayari dyan sa Senate. I mean, imagine how big a deal it was for Maricel Soriano to pop up in one of those hearings. How big a deal the Alisco investigations became. But imagine if Digong or someone close to Digong, right, is dragged to the hearings. Well, Senate, I'm not sure about Senate because andun si but maybe in the Congress or somewhere along those lines. So we're entering some very interesting territories here. And tignan natin how the Marcos administration will work on this, and let's look at how the rest of the people will look at this. Unfortunately, with fanatics, hopeless case mga yan. But soft voters, soft backers, yung mga iba dyan na medyo pwede mag-swing, tignan natin how they're gonna react to this. On that note, thank you very much. Maraming salamat again sa lahat ng mga sumuporta sa atin, sa lahat ng nanonood sa atin. Thank you so much again for your constructive criticisms and comments and your support. Please continue to support us also on Spotify and podcast natin on Apple. Kulang pa tayo ng ratings. Medyo mataas naman ang ratings natin, thank you, but we need more people to rate us para lumabas tayo doon sa algorithm. Again, Deep Dive with Richard Haydarian. Just lagay lang Haydarian, Richard Haydarian. Lalabas yan sa both Spotify and dito sa Apple Podcast. Please continue to support us. Also, of course, tuloy-tuloy lang sana itong pag-subscribe nyo sa YouTube channel natin. And of course, yung iba, may problema sila sa notification dito sa Facebook. Please make sure that you press the notification on kasi may mga changes na ginawa ng Facebook para alam niyo naman when we're going live. On that note, thank you very much. God bless and talk to you soon. Salamat guys. Have a good night. Thank you very much. And please, tuloy-tuloy ang pag-support niya sa amin. Alright? And watch check yung kaka-upload lang natin with Ronald Llamas. Alright? Yung ginawa natin. And susunod bukas yung mga ibang interesting ginawa natin kahapon with Kristan and Attorney Star. God bless and talk to you soon.